What if Monsterverse Godzilla swapped universes with Final Wars Godzilla? As I've covered in many of my videos, Legendary Godzilla is at the very least comparable in power, if not far superior, to base Final Wars, though his speed is far slower. But with that in mind, and his different fighting style, how would he handle this new dimension? Say they swapped places after Final Wars was sealed in the ice. Could Legendary possibly win, or will he be a victim of the Exilian invasion? Time to find out. So unlike the tales of certain shorts YouTubers, I'm not going to just incoherently bullshit about the level of power of the Final Wars Kaiju. For the most part, they stink. Zilla died to a building explosion from Final Wars. Kamakris got impaled on a tower and it didn't even bend much. Ebra was shot by mini masers and got his eye exploded. Now that's not to reflect on Final Wars himself. He's pretty powerful. Very few of the monsters can actually say that they scale to him. The only ones who do are Monster X, possibly amplified Gigan, and Mothra. Nobody else really even compares to him. With that noted, so we are going to place Legendary into the Final Wars verse, starting in the 2014 era, which means he's actually going to be dealing with a few of the monsters probably before the Exilian invasion. It's not given a specific date, but we know that Godzilla was locked until at least the 2020s, meaning that Final Wars has to take place probably after current day. Considering the Monsterverse is currently in 2027, this is fine. So, when things like Ebra just sort of spawn out of thin air, Godzilla will come in and pretty handily deal with them. You know, we're not a bunch of Plo-Coots here. We're not going to argue that the Ebra, who got his eyes shut out by mini masers, is some outer-versal deity who can beat up Cthulhu. I mean, that'd be funny, but it's not true. Godzilla will cement himself the same way he did in the Monsterverse as the king of the monsters, and Final Wars will just kind of be teleported out of here. So Area G will still be on lockdown, but there will actually not be anything in there. So we skip ahead, and Legendary has decided to feed on radiation, causing him to raid a few power plants, and causing the GDF to face him. Of course, none of their mutants can really do anything to him, and the Gotengo itself also proves to be no match. After all, Final Wars could down it with a single blast. So Legendary, who's even more powerful, seems unlikely that the machine will be able to stop him. Its freezing ability may be of use, since it can freeze things to absolute zero, but so can Shimo, who Godzilla has fought before, even in his base form. Meaning that even the absolute zero beam from the Gotengo will probably not do too much damage to him, since it then had to drill in order to kill Amanda. During the events of Final Wars, however, after Godzilla has restored himself to his full strength, is when the attacks on the planet begin. The monsters infected with M-Base begin their rampage. Godzilla can't be in 10 places at once, so he heads for the strongest energy source. This would be Gigan, of course, who he tracks to Antarctica as it chases down the Gotengo. To their surprise, the Godzilla that they knew is no longer here, but just as Gigan's about to down the Gotengo, Godzilla Legendary appears and catches him off guard with a blast of atomic breath, instantly removing one of the cyborg's limbs. Gigan counters with his laser, but the most it can do is briefly irritate Legendary. Gigan is faster than Godzilla, but he quickly proves to be too strong and destroys Gigan's head. Godzilla begins to pursue the other monsters, basically in the exact same gauntlet that Final Wars went through. So I think most people will generally agree that most of these guys are just getting wiped. Zilla's getting killed, Kamakris killed, Kumonga killed. He may leave Anguirus, Rodan, and Caesar alive, but there's also a chance that he would kill them. As for Ghidorah and Ebra, they also get killed. This leads him to Tokyo, where Monster X's meteor arrives. Same as Final Wars, he also shoots a blast up to space. It's quite unknown if he can reach that level of distance, but I'd argue he can, considering he could blast over 6,000 miles down to the core of the planet, and space starts at only 100 miles. It kinda tracks that he would be able to do this, especially if he keeps it up for any real period of time. This leads to an interesting battle, Legendary's first challenge in this new universe. Monster X, stronger than base Final Wars initially, and even faster. While Legendary has the advantage in brute strength, he's outsped by the alien tyrant. Similar to his fight with Mechagodzilla, this would mean that he may be under actual pressure, since while he is stronger than Monster X, it's going to be kind of hard to manhandle him since he can't really get a good hold. If X tries brute force though, like he did initially, then there's a pretty good shot Legendary just overpowers him. The destroyed gravity beams will prove to be quite troublesome, but since he could take gravity beams from his own Ghidorah back home, I think he can manage just fine, through either spamming his atomic breath or using the nuclear pulse. Legendary will get an upper hand against Monster X. This will result in him trying to transform into Kaiser Ghidorah. Legendary will most likely not just stand there and watch like Final Wars did, but instead try to interfere. Then again, he did watch Ghidorah power up in Boston, so he may kinda just be stand there in shock. If he does transform into Kaiser Ghidorah, he will be stronger than Legendary, and still much faster. In fact, even faster than before. He was able to blitz Final Wars mid-beam fire after all. Final Wars is already faster than Legendary. With that in mind, it seems near impossible for a Legendary to get the upper hand in his base form. If he spams his atomic breath and pulse, Kaiser will just intercept with his gravity beams, to which he will then start using to start beating on Godzilla, dropping him from heights and causing enough trauma and internal damage that honestly, he might just one-shot knock him out, same way he did Final Wars. To mention that Kaiser has cosmic classes of firepower, a statement used for monsters that could destroy entire stars. If you do take this as star level for Kaiser Ghidorah, rather than just planetary, then there's actually a good chance that Kaiser is vastly stronger than base form Legendary, whose only cosmic statements come from the novelization writer and the Monarch Legacy of Monsters show, which is of dubious canon. But with that noted, it seems like this stuff doesn't really apply to the films at this point, and if it does, the films sure aren't acting like it. Even so, with this higher end stuff, Kaiser should at least be at the level of Legendary, if not higher. Since he's much faster, he's going to get a lot of attacks pretty quickly. Legendary's only chance would be to be amped by the Gotengo, as far as I can see it. He could try melee combat, but I honestly don't think he'll really get the opportunity. Kaiser is a glass cannon, he can't really take his own gravity beams, they chop through his own body. But that said, I don't know if Legendary in his base can really do anything about that. He's stronger than base Final Wars, but not by that much. Not enough to turn around this stomp. If he is amped though, then this could lead to some interesting things. Base Final Wars was horrifically weakened, and despite that, he was still able to turn around the stomp after being amped by his own energy from the Gotengo. So if Legendary, who is more powerful, gets this power up, then there's a good chance he'll erase Kaiser with ease. He would still be slower, so that begs the question if he could get it off. And if he can't, then Kaiser might just drain him like a juice box. I'll leave that one up for the audience at the moment. Now let's talk about if he somehow just turns into evolved, or burning, or gets the amped-like state he did from Boston and the power plant. So, if we include his various power-ups, pretty clear that he becomes a good bit stronger. Evolved is stated objectively to be a 2 times increase to his level of strength, but it does have a 20 times energy capacity, meaning that if Godzilla was to absorb enough energy to fill himself up to his limit, he would be 20 times stronger than before. As for his nuked state, it's more than likely comparable in power, since the entire basis of the Spiral Race statement of strength is off the previous levels of the nuked state. That would just automatically mean they are of some comparable yield. The problem with the nuked state is that it's incredibly unstable, whereas Evolved can maintain that level and is not going to explode and die, as explained by the book writer. Now that said, this doesn't include his burning form, because there is no radiation readings of his burning form. Seems inconsistent at least. So if we do take that Evolved is a 2x strength amp with increased molecular durability, thermoregulation, and did adapt to the anti-gravity conditions of the Hollow Earth, then there is somewhat of a chance that he could put up a better performance against Kaiser Ghidorah. If he just goes psychotic mode immediately and starts spamming spiral beams and you think they're 20 times his base, then he would actually be stronger than Kaiser Ghidorah, which should let him win if he manages to get them off. The problem is Kaiser is a lot faster, and it does not take him long to charge his beams, whereas Legendary takes a prolonged time to charge the spiral beam. So Kaiser is definitely going to get attacks off first. This leaves Evolved in a predicament, in that he's just being speed blitzed and barraged by gravity beams that are definitely better than the ones he faced before, since these actually have effects on gravity. Blunt force trauma also definitely works on Evolved Godzilla. This is the only thing Kong can do to him, and it affects him better than it does base. With the novelization even pointing out, Kong actually expected Godzilla to shoot right back up, so you can actually probably argue that Evolved is physically weaker. Either way, Kaiser would have no problem throwing him around, constantly barraging him, and since he's so much faster, it would be at the very lowest end of a beating like Mechagodzilla's. If they were to beam clash, the spiral beam could overpower Kaiser, and Kaiser doesn't really dodge, but that's against Final Wars, who's a good bit faster. Even then, he could sort of react to amped Final Wars, who's even faster than himself. So it's really down to Burning Godzilla. Burning Godzilla not only would calc all the way up to star level off of his massively superior increase to Evolved and Nuked, and on top of that, he has an omnidirectional attack that, if he actually did nuke Ghidorah Storm like is very much implied, then there's no way Kaiser could escape. In fact, it's superior to the level that Final Wars used when he blasted him with the Burn G-Spark Heat Ray. That would mean that Kaiser just gets one shot, and there's really nothing he can do. In burning form, he can also absorb energy from King Ghidorah, so he could probably do the same to Kaiser. Now, for extra overkill, if he does use his new base form, and the Gotenko powers him up into burning on top of his new base, then he'd be a 20 times more powerful Burning Godzilla and just neg even worse. Anyway, that's all for this one. See you guys next time.